Welcome to the Produce Moms Podcast, where we believe there is a produce mom in all of us. I'm Lori Taylor, founder and CEO of the Produce Moms. For 10 years, I sold fresh produce to over 300 grocery stores in the U.S. And today, my team and I are fully focused on inspiring people to eat more fruits and vegetables. This show is just one of the ways that we hope to inspire you and your family to eat more produce and live a better life. If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, join our community of almost 40,000 in all 50 states and over 30 countries by visiting theproducemoms.com/subscribe. And be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes. Thanks for being here. Enjoy today's show. Welcome back, everyone. Today is a great day at the Produce Moms Podcast. We have a woman as our guest today who is just a true leader in the global produce industry. I'm so honored that she's here today as our guest. We are all going to learn a lot. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Wendelyn Jones. She is the global leader of food chain and brand protection at Corteva Agriscience, and she has a passion for commercial effectiveness. Wendelyn, welcome.
Hi, Lori. It's very exciting for me to be joining you and all the listeners on the Produce Moms Podcast, and look forward to our discussion today.
Yeah, I think this is going to be great. I think that probably the best place for us to start, Wendelyn, is to just kind of lay the groundwork here, do some 101. Most of our listeners, most of our followers at the Produce Moms are the end consumer and the shopper. So let's just start right with, definitions. Corteva is the agricultural division of DuPont. So explain a little bit about this. Is this a new term for the multi-generation ag companies, or when did Corteva form? Help inform our listeners.
Sure, absolutely. So 2017, Dow Chemical and DuPont Chemical merged to become Dow DuPont. The intent of the merger was to merge the two and spin out into three different companies. The Ag division, which includes DuPont Pioneer, DuPont Crop Protection, and Dow Agrisciences, all came together as a pure play ag company known as Corteva Agriscience. Now, Corteva, you're sitting there going, Corteva doesn't have anything to do with Dow or DuPont. You would have thought that there maybe even have a D with it, right? But no, what we did was kind of go, you know what? No, let's really think about our unique position as a 100% ag-focused company and come up with a name that reflects it. So Corteva comes from two different words, cor being heart or center in Latin, and teva meaning nature in Hebrew. So you put Corteva together, you put those two parts together, and you wound up with Corteva, which means kind of the heart of nature or the center of nature. And when we think about agriculture and the role that agriculture plays in food, it starts to kind of make sense. Wait, we're kind of the heart on how you go from what's going on in nature to food, which we all know is foundational for life.
Sure. Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit more about the products you provide. I mean, certainly your sentiment, and, the way in which you brought together the name for this division, that is that kind of pulls at the heartstrings for everyone. That's definitely, that's wonderful. I didn't know that. So thank you for sharing that. But let's talk a little bit about the products you provide and help our listeners understand. So here's this big global company, and you have, a global leadership position within this company, but who is Corteva's customer? Why are you here and what do you do?
Sure. So Corteva is here to, on first glance, serve our farmer customers. Okay, they really are our customers, if you want to think about it. But we realize that there's more to it than that. As a company, we sell seeds. As a company, we sell crop protection products, also known as pesticides. And we also have a digital ag play as well. So we're focused on farmers and, dare I say, farmer productivity. But we actually took time as we were forming Corteva out of, Dow and DuPont, and what we like to say is we're, 200-year-old startup, right? Okay. But we took time to go, you know what? We are purely focused on the farmer, but we know that there's more to it than that. So let's really pause and define our purpose. And where we landed on is the purpose of Corteva is to enrich the lives of those who produce and those who consume, ensuring progress for generations to come. So within that purpose statement, we're actually saying, yes, our customer is the farmer, okay? But we understand we've got to be enriching the lives of those who farm, right? But those who consume as well. So we're realizing that there's this pretty significant role that we play in the food value chain, if you would, right? Including fruits and veggies, where, wow, if we're going to be enriching the lives of farmers and we're going to be enriching the lives of consumers, we need to recognize that we've got to play kind of post-harvest, right? We've got all the work that we've traditionally done going into the farm, right? But what comes out of the farm with the harvest, right? With those fruits and veggies, that becomes really important to us. So we're purposefully embracing as Corteva, thinking deeper and going, wow, we have a key role that we play in that food and nutrition space, because if we're going to enrich the lives of those who produce, the farmers, right? Farming is successful and is key because it's all about keeping people healthy, keeping people active, and keeping people well fed. And that's the role that we realize that we play.
That's good. That's good. So let's talk a little bit, you mentioned that among the products and services that are offered by Corteva, one is crop protection. We have to dive into that a little because, as a resource for a lot of households throughout the United States and even beyond, our community has grown to include not just every state in America, but we have subscribers, I think, in just over 30 countries. So we get a lot of inquiry from the end consumer, the followers at the Produce Moms, on and just feedback in general on things like pesticides, and we have to be mindful of the fact that terminology like pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, fertilizers, chemicals, or even agriscience for that matter, these are just terms that consumers don't necessarily like. And there are assumptions and confusion that food grown with these items are GMO or quote unquote dirty, or there's an assumption that they're less healthy. So I'm hoping that today in this episode, you can help us really understand why crop protection exists, what it is and what it is not, and what Corteva provides to farmers and the supply chain at large that benefits consumers, benefits all the produce moms throughout the United States.
Right. Absolutely. And, it is terminology that can be a little bit off-putting, right? To sit there and say, pesticides, right? Insecticides, herbicides, fungicides. But all of these are important tools for farmers. And, pesticides just out of the gate, I want to note that they are very tactically and strategically applied for both organic and conventional crops. Okay. And that application is to protect them from, the insects, the weeds, and the diseases. But, the story that I've told, and this is true. When I was a little girl, I went out to my grandfather had not what you would call in any possible way a commercial orchard, okay? But he had a small row of trees and was like, go grab something, and you can have that to eat. Okay, that's really kind of cool, right? I mean, I'm just going out there and grabbing something I can eat as much as I want. So I grabbed a peach, right? And yep, go ahead and eat it. Bit into it, and there was a worm. And it was the most disgusting thing ever. And candidly, I probably didn't eat peaches for another 2 years after that. Okay, just that entire experience. And I think that that's something that folks can perhaps relate to, those experiences where you have picked up a fresh produce element, what have you, and gone, oh, yuck, it's got an insect in it. And then you realize, wait a second, that's why farmers use these pesticides, right? So farmers use insecticides, right, to control the pests so that you don't have the worms in the peaches, all right? Farmers will use herbicides to control weeds. And you sit there and go, well, why does controlling weeds matter? Well, let's realize that the weeds compete for the nutrients that are in the soil that your crop's growing in. So you wind up with a case where those weeds are trying to basically not make the crop that you're growing as nutrient rich, as healthy, etc. So they go and apply herbicides so that there's more nutrients in the soil for the fruit or the veggies, for the produce that you want to eat, and not for that weed that you don't want to eat. Now, fungicides is kind of one of those where people go, I don't even understand what you're talking about, right? So the way you can think about it is, plants get sick, right? Perhaps everybody's, and it happened in my house too. Your house plant's there, next thing you know, you look over at it and there's like these weird brown spots on it, right? Or you go out and into your garden or your flower beds and everything's got all this white residue stuff on it. Well, what's going on there is the plant is getting sick, just like people get sick, right? The plants are getting sick. So you go and, you can apply chemicals, right? You can apply these crop protection products to help make that plant healthier, which is the disease management aspects, and that's where fungicides come into play. So, when plants show up in the field and they're sick, farmers will apply the medicine or apply the fungicides to help them feel better. So that's kind of it, just kind of explaining the three biggest categories, if you would, of the pesticide arena.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Thank you. And, so let's talk a little bit now about a program I learned about in preparation for today's episode. And I think it's really going to resonate with our listeners. And, from what I've researched, it's relatively new at Corteva. I'd like to talk about Corteva's Connects. What is this program, and how does Connects serve ag, and how does it benefit consumers?
Right. So I'll answer the question very briefly at first, right?
Sure. And then let's dive in.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. Thanks.
Sure. So Connects is a global business service, right, that helps link our products, okay, our crop protection products, our seed products, okay, to farmers, to food processors, to food retailers like grocery stores, and ultimately the consumer. What we know is that fruit and veggies start in the field, they're cultivated and harvest. And when we think about Corteva's purpose of enriching the lives of those who produce and those who consume, you realize that we have that clear role to play in connecting that value chain aspect to it. So that's it, kind of at a high level. Lori, would you like me to kind of go into how we kind of help the different parts of the chain?
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Okay, so for farmers, what we do is we share our global knowledge to answer their local questions, okay? So we can, through our Connect service, provide advice to the farmer growing those pineapples in Costa Rica to help them be able to export those pineapples, say, to the U.S. or somewhere else in the world, right? For food processors and for food retailers, we're focused on supporting the resiliency of their supply chain, right? So they're out there trying to make sure that they have a supply of avocados coming in, okay? Well, they want to be able to know who they can work with, right? How those crops can be grown, how that produce can be grown to meet the requirements that they have as they're trying to meet their market segments. So an example, we've got that avocado grower who's growing in Peru. We might work, say, with a restaurant chain here in the United States to say, hey, in advance of guac season, what we want to make sure we do is help you understand that grower in Peru can meet the quality standards that you're trying to achieve for your restaurants. So we play that role in helping connect that way. So what does this have to do then with the consumer? Well, Lori, as you know, only about 10% of the U.S. population eats the recommended amount of fruits and veggies, okay? And if you're going to be driving to increase that number, right, since we know that this goes towards a clear public health good, if we're going to be able to drive that increase in consumptions of fruits and veggies, we know that the consumer has to be able to access it either through brands that they're buying that are buying at grocery stores, be able to access it through restaurants, right? And that means that the farmers have to be providing it. So we play a role in helping support the consumer availability of the needed quality, nutrition, and safety that they're looking for to buy themselves. So we are trying to kind of connect, right, all the way across the value chain. And our terminology here with our Connects Global Business Service is that, and I'll spell it out for everyone. It's CONNEXT. It's about collaborating and looking forward to what's next, because that's what we realize is also going on, is that the consumer pace and the consumer trends are changing. So how can we work and share the knowledge that we have, right? Help integrate and drive those collaborations to move forward to help the consumer for the next day and the next day and the next day.
Right. And my goodness, as you're explaining this, I just keep thinking in my mind that this is all really consumer driven. This is a testament to meeting consumer demands and Corteva providing that leadership throughout the supply or value chain.
Right. That's exactly what we're looking to do here, right? Is provide that leadership and enrich the lives, right, of everyone, right? Not just our farmer customers, but everybody else.
Sure. Yeah. No, it sounds amazing. So that's very insightful, and I'm glad you could share, because prior to today's conversation, when I was preparing for this episode, to me, that was a new program. How long has Connects been in existence or been an offering of Corteva?
Right. So I would say in both Heritage DuPont and Heritage Dow, we had individual programs going. Okay.
Sure. Okay.
So, DuPont had its own program. Dow had its own program. And what we've done with Connects, which is what we've done with Corteva, is really take the best ideas of the best ideas and not do a 1 + 1 = 2, but go, wow, no, let's think about it differently and let's make it a 1 + 1 = 3, right? So that we realize that, the solutions that we're providing the farmers on how to meet the market restrictions that exist in their markets, right? That same information, we can just turn it around and also use that to support the restaurants, to support the retailers, to support the processors. So, it's been around since Corteva, dare I say, came about, right? Corteva spins to a separate publicly traded entity in June, but we've been doing it kind of since Corteva came together, and it's been fun just kind of building out and realizing, well, we've got this predictive tool, we've got that capability. It's a great deal of fun.
Right. No, sounds like an amazing program, and look forward to seeing all that happens with Connects. It's really really appreciate the insights you've shared with us today on the call. So, another thing, Wendelyn, that I really didn't know much about until I started following you on LinkedIn, was about all the counterfeit and illegal products, and how that's affecting, the sustainable development and shifting goals and blockchain strategies in agriculture. So I really first want to encourage all of our listeners today, if you are passionate about agriculture, if you are passionate about the global supply chain or commercial effectiveness within this industry, follow Dr. Wendelyn Jones on LinkedIn. The articles she publishes, the content she shares, I've learned so much simply by being connected with our guest today on LinkedIn. So please go do that. Second of all, Wendelyn, I'd like to help people understand this, because to me it was like really eye-opening. So my first question on this topic of counterfeit and illegal products is, why do we have to authenticate pesticides and seeds?
Right. So we're in a situation globally where about the numbers about 10% of the seeds sold in the world, and the crop protection products, the global average, they are fake. They are made by criminals. Okay. Mm-hmm. And, that number is actually much higher in some countries, and in Asia Pacific, you can wind up with, 30 to 50% of the crop protection or the seed that's sold being made by criminals. Okay. So that authentication piece comes into play because it's a way to ensure that the start of food, right? That seed you plant, that care that you apply on the food side, that is legitimate and authentic, right? Because the authentic and legal products, go through intensive testing and strict regulatory evaluations before they're placed on the market. The counterfeit and other illegal products that the criminals make, they don't go through any of that testing, right? So you can wind up with, products that cause harm to the environment, cause harm to water, cause harm to the food, right? Not to mention the impact on farmer yield. And that impact costs everybody billions of dollars. And that's a billions with a B, and that's not an exaggeration, right?
Wow.
So
right.
We can go in and get folks to make sure that they're using only authentic and legal products. We're going to be better off for that sustainable development, right? For agriculture and for food.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, obviously this is I guess essentially it's a black market on pesticides and seeds. It's an illegal black market with illegal products and distribution. And so that's obviously a threat to a supplier like Corteva, but especially realizing the scale at which this is affecting the agriculture industry, billions of dollars, that's a threat that has to be a threat to consumers and the broader ag industry, not just Corteva.
Correct, and that's actually a big reason why we do some work, right, and we partner with others in industry to try and address the threat. But let me get into a bit more around what is this threat, what is this risk?
Yeah. Okay.
So you wind up with a farmer, right? Let's just say unsuspecting, okay, goes, buys a product. Let's say it's one of our crop protection products, but it's not really ours. It is made by a criminal, and I'm using criminal very purposefully because that's what this is. Okay, they're criminals. Right? They go and they've packaged it up so it looks like our product, right? It looks like a legitimate product, right? But it's not. And then they spray that chemical on their crop. All right. So you have this chemical that has not been tested, right? Not been evaluated by any third party, by any government, right? That then winds up on the food that people are going to eat. You wind up with this unknown, untested chemical winding up in the soil and the land. You have this unknown chemical that could perhaps wind up in the water, right? You have this unknown chemical that perhaps then gets consumed by the wildlife that also goes through the field, right? The impacts are just significant when you realize that these are untested, unproven, unreviewed products that are going out there in the world. So that's why we've got this, and we realize it as a significant threat. And part of why why I put that article up on LinkedIn was to kind of say, this is not just about hurting the revenue of Corteva or any other, major player in the food and ag space. This is really impacting sustainable development, okay, around the world and to elevate it that way.
That's a really amazing insight. And you can tell from following you on LinkedIn and from listening to your sentiments here on the podcast that, Corteva is committed to combating this or stopping this criminal activity. It's obviously hurting everyone in the food supply chain and agriculture value chain. So why don't you explain a little bit how blockchain could be a potential solution to some of this?
Right, sure. Thanks, Laurie. So what we know is that stopping criminals from misbehaving takes joint effort from everybody, okay? And it's about, on one hand, promoting proactively growing right, okay? That's kind of our tagline on it, growing right. It's also about making sure that the players in that food and ag space are equipped with and incentivized to only buy legal and authentic products, making sure that the food processors, ask for the receipts from their farmer suppliers for the products that were used on the development of it, right? And making sure that governments have a robust enforcement system to deter the criminal activity. But, where blockchain comes into play is that if you could imagine whether it is a QR code or other kind of label tag, right? We can get into the traceability of the crop protection product, right? For example, or the traceability of that bag of seed to be able to know where those ag inputs, that seed, that crop protection was made, right? Trace it all the way through the distribution channel to the farmer, and then the farmer then scans that. You can envision this as the future state. The farmer then scans that that's what they applied or planted in the field at this stage. They scan it in to know this is what was harvested, and then the food processor or the retailer can go, wow, I've got all this electronic information, right? All of this data, perhaps linked through a blockchain tool, to know that those potatoes that came out, to know that those apples that came off, they were grown with these seeds, these crop protection treatments, right? I know that, to manage a sickness, this fungicide was applied, etc. They'll be able to know it all the way to the end. And so that the consumer at the end of the day also then has access to all of that information.
Sure.
So I think that's the trend, right?
It's the way. I mean, it is the new way. That is definitely blockchain is. It's almost become the new standard. Don't you agree?
The real interest that consumers have in understanding more about where and how their food was grown is only going to increase, right? And
for sure.
it is part of that solution, absolutely, right? I'm stopping short of saying it's the only solution because I'm not quite there, but it's clearly part of that solution. And that is going to be through that type of systems that allow that traceability and transparency that I think we're going to be able to, really shape how consumers interact with their food. I mean, it's coming. We're all seeing it. So I'm entirely aligned with you on that.
Yeah, definitely. This has just been an incredible episode. And, I would be remiss to have a powerhouse like you on the show and not ask you to share a little bit of encouragement for any other young females in agriculture that that are starting their career, or females in the middle management tier, or even females who are, sitting at the executive level in ag. I mean, there's just, any way you slice it, there are not a lot of females who can say my job depends on ag. There's more than there used to be, but we're still not at a state of, that 50-50 split in the workforce or anywhere close to that. So I would love to hear your thoughts. I mean, here we have today on the show a woman who has a global leadership position with one of the largest agriculture companies in the world. So, Wendelyn, please share any insights you might have as it relates to, female leadership in agriculture.
Sure. So thanks for that question, Laura. This is actually a pretty deep passion of mine. If you're thinking about moving into agriculture, right, or candidly moving into any other STEM field, and you're a young woman listening to this podcast, I would definitely encourage you to do it. Okay, if you're a mom sitting there going, my daughter really seems to like that science and math, please encourage her to do it. Okay, please encourage them to continue interest in agriculture if they have it. One of the things that we did as Corteva, and it came out in 2018, was we did a survey looking at women in ag and what could be done about it. And one of the number one, I'll say, obstacles that was noted is the awareness of success that women are having in agriculture. And the fact that, 75% of the respondents on the survey said, no, we need to be more out there, and we need to encourage more women to celebrate their successes on what they have achieved in agriculture if we are going to start addressing some of those barriers, right? Addressing some of those gender disparity issues. So, in my career, I have been fortunate enough to work with some outstanding female leaders, including Suzanne Wasson, who's currently with Corteva as well. And just, my ask then becomes, and I try and do it myself, is if you are mid or even senior, take time mentor, have the conversations with the young women in your company or even outside of your company to encourage them to continue in ag. We are making a difference, and it's being embraced and it's being understood. So thank you for that opportunity to make that pitch for mentoring, Lori.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I'm glad you shared that. And, as someone who, in many ways, I feel like I'm just beginning to leave my mark and come into my own here within this industry that has embraced my work. I immediately was just you have this compelling presence for anyone who meets you. I for all of our listeners today, I met Wendelyn at the Produce for Better Health Foundation conference, and she was like my favorite person from that entire week because we would sit down, we had these insightful conversations, and her leadership is evident, but it's also a very welcoming spirit. And before we close out today's show, I want to certainly thank you, Wendelyn, for spending time when we were together at the PBH conference to learn more about the work that I do and taking interest in it and being quick to say, yes, I would love to come on the podcast. Like right there is an example of, leadership in action, frankly. And I've learned a lot during today's episode. I'm going to be a better steward of agriculture with what you've shared today, carrying that forward as we educate consumers on all of their top questions and inquiries as it relates to agriculture and fresh produce. And I'm certain that our listeners feel the same way. So before we send the mic back to you, because that is our tradition here at the Produce Moms podcast, our guests always have the last word, but I want to say thank you. And I would like you to tell our listeners where they can go to learn more about Corteva, follow you on LinkedIn, and certainly share any of those last words.
Right. So thanks, Lori. It has been a sincere privilege and honor to be on the podcast today. I think, with only 10% of the U.S. population eating enough fruits and veggies, we need more programs like Connects, right? And, if you want to find out more about Corteva, please follow us. We've got a Facebook page. We also have a Twitter account. And then, of course, there is Corteva.com. And, more importantly and personally, if anybody wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to accept the connections, and I look forward to continuing to work with you, Lori, and others at Produce Moms as we really kind of help drive change in food and agriculture.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Produce Moms podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a featured guest, just send an email to lori@theproducemoms.com. We know there is a produce mom in you because there's a produce mom in all of us. Join our community on Facebook and all social platforms. Help us change the way America eats. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.